Hello and welcome to this introduction to VOX-FE2 in ParaView used as a plugin. If you don't happen to have built ParaView and the plugin yourself, then hopefully you've got a bundle that looks a bit like this on Ubuntu. There should be a similar version for Windows which has everything apart from the solver. But you will need Ubuntu or some kind of Unixy type machine to run the solver. I've just run ParaView from this from clicking on this file, and here it is running without the plugin installed. To actually install the plugin, you've got to go to Tools, Manage Plugins, and Load New. These are all the files that are in that directory. If I go up, you should find hopefully a VOX-FE directory, and there's the plugin. If I click OK and everything comes up alright, then it will say it's loaded, and it will give you an error message, which will usually mean that there is some conflict between versions going on, or the compiler version that's been used. But luckily it's all gone okay here, and you can click auto load to load automatically again in future, but I'll leave it off at the moment. And loading the plugin has given us these buttons here, most of which are greyed out because there's actually nothing in the screen to actually operate on. For a moment I'll just introduce you to some of the things of ParaView. You can see there's another menu here that's blocked out again because there's nothing really to do anything with. So if we go to sources and create something, let's create the default sphere. This is quite often the way that ParaView works. You create some object when it appears in the system. It comes up in this pipeline browser, but actually it's not fully existing, as it were, yet, because there's no information available, and it's still really waiting for us to click apply. The reason we do it like that is so that we can change some of these parameters, and that will quite often be the case, and you will need to do that with more and more care the larger your models are, because they will take a few minutes to load. There is an option here to use auto apply. By and large it's better to leave that off, except under some particular circumstances, so that you can set these parameters how you actually want to set them. The defaults are usually kind of sensible, but they're not always what you want. But if I click apply now, as an example, you can see I get a kind of very rough looking sphere, and if I wanted to make that a little bit nicer, I might change some of these parameters. And that gives us a pretty reasonable sphere. It doesn't even look like it's actually sort of rotating anymore, but we can mess with it a little more, and there we have a sort of half sphere, and we can do things like select points, and we can and you see that now the VOX-FE buttons have actually lit up, because most of these functions will apply to some or parts of these objects, but by and large what ParaView tries to do is to slim these things down, so that if you look in the filters menu, you can see that some things are now available to us, because in the information box we actually have what it calls a polygonal mesh. So we can apply all these operators to that polygonal mesh, but not all of them, because they don't all apply. At the moment though, this is not very interesting for us. We're not really all that interested in generating spheres. We want to be able to look at our CT data. So I can click this object, it's already selected actually, and I can click delete, or I can right click on there and click delete. As long as there's nothing down below in the pipeline, as it were, you can always delete the last object, and you can we could actually do undo, or keep doing undo from this position, and it would go back, or we could actually click this button and it would reset everything to the very beginning. But just to introduce a few more of the controls, we have alignment controls here, which will align our object with the original XYZ axes. We have a reset button, so that if you sort of zoom in with your, if you scroll in like this a little bit too far and you kind of get lost in your object, the reset button takes everything back to a kind of sensible place. These functions allow you to set centers to rotate about, or to choose particular points to rotate about. These are animation buttons which are useful for if you have a kind of series of files and you want to animate through that series, kind of like pressing a VCR, and we will be using that a bit later on in another tutorial. We have file open and colour mapping options, and I'll explain a little bit more about those later too. So if I load my VOX-FE object, I get rid of this sphere thing, and I load what we're calling a beam model in the first tutorial. So here, this beam.voxfe, and I click OK, and as before it's waiting for us to click apply, but I just want to check really that what we're giving it here makes sense. If I just flip over into the other screen, you can see what this beam model is all about. This is actually just a simple text file which is telling the system to load everything here, which is called beam256k underscore, and then the %03 is a C printf specifier style thing that is telling the system to load everything which is 000 to 999.bmp. As it happens, in our directory here we've got from 1 to 320, is it something? So it will just go and find all those files and load them. You can actually in here just put star.bmp, which will load everything that it finds, but the advantage of specifying this out is that the system can check a little bit more thoroughly on what you're actually loading, and it will actually output a log file in this directory saying all the files that it found, and outputting a little error message if say one image was bad or something. And that can be quite useful if you've got quite a lot of images and you need to check that something hasn't gone wrong. So if I flick back to ParaView, and now I want to change this file range to 320 to load everything. Quite often with big images you might well only want to load a small number of slices to start with, just to check that it's okay, or just to see what it is, check that it's all right, and that can save a lot of time ultimately, just to do that little check first. We have some material settings, and that relates to groups, which is a concept we'll explain in another tutorial. The solver algorithm that works with the current solver is this, so it's better just to leave that as it is for now, and you have the option of creating some extra files that aren't really relevant at the moment. So I'll go ahead and click apply, and that should load our 320 images. It's telling us now that it's 250,000 elements or so, and so that this object is now available in the pipeline browser, and we can apply all these operations to it. Obviously, one of the first things you want to do when you've got a new object is really to investigate it a little. This one's not very interesting, but we're going to apply some clip operations, let's say, to see what's inside. And as before, we can choose our normals and how we want to clip this object. The way that clip works is to keep the side sort of pointing towards the arrow. So if I go ahead and clip, it takes away the sort of back face of that clip, and we can now click Auto Apply On and sort of move through our object. It's giving us an error where I went outside that, but that means nothing. And because Auto Apply is on, you can just click and it will automatically run through these updates for you. I can take that back off and I get rid of my clip. Slice is another sort of variation on that, where it takes one slice through our object. If I click Auto Apply back on, then we can move through our object in near real time, and that's a great way to have a look at complicated structures and make sure that something's not missing. There's thresholding here if you've got different material types involved, but we have a better way of breaking up different material types using groups, which is, I think I've mentioned before, is something that we're of a later tutorial we'll come back to. And all the other buttons I've mentioned. One thing I haven't mentioned, if I get rid of the slice, that's really useful in ParaView, are these extract buttons. So you can select different points on the surface, or you can select cells right through your object, and this is a nice way to set boundary conditions, because we obviously do want to be able to select points on a surface and select those boundaries. But as we select, actually nothing happens in the pipeline browser, because these points or cells or whatever they are aren't really taken to be a separate object that you can actually act on. They're just selections. So to actually create that separate object, you need this button here, which is called Extract Selection, and that will create a separate object with so many points, and it actually applied automatically there because Auto Apply was on. There's a couple of interesting things about that. If I get rid of that particular selection, supposing I didn't like it, something that's very useful to know is that I can create a selection by just selecting this button. You always have to come back and press this button. I can get rid of that by clicking sort of outside the object. If I collect this region and I click it again and press Control, that means it will add to the existing selection. And obviously in a simple case like this, it's not difficult to select particular points, but on a more complicated object it often is. And if you happen to have extracted those points and then decided that maybe you didn't want all these points down here, or there was one or two points that you really didn't want to include, you can use the clip function on those extracted points to get rid of them. So this is let's say in the Z-axis here, so we can use our clip and we can change the the way the arrow is at the moment. It's going to keep these points on this side. So if we change that direction of that arrow, then we can bring that up and it will remove points. Little tricky to try and get exactly the ones, but now we've managed to remove all those points that maybe we didn't want. So that is a way of removing points. You can use Control to add points, but there's no similar function to remove them apart from using this kind of clip idea. Okay, so if I delete all those at the moment, it's still waiting to do an apply there. But that is a basic introduction to ParaView and the VOX-FE2 plugin. Another feature that I might just mention though is being able to change the surface representation. Just to check your object, VOX-FE works on cubic voxels, and it imports those voxels as little cubes, which is kind of hard to see, but that's basically what's happening because this is such a solid object, and it can be useful to just check that to make sure that some part of the structure isn't missing. you can draw it in different kind of ways to try and select different points to have the surface with edges feature on can help quite a bit. At the moment there's no kind of colour mapping because we haven't added anything really very interesting to our data, so that it's not really allowing us to do very much with the colour mapping, but we'll be coming back to that in a later tutorial, I feel pretty sure. Okay, thanks, bye.